I was enjoying a quiet Saturday afternoon on my dock when the telltale sound of expensive heels clicking on wood made me look up from my fishing line. My private lake glittered in the afternoon sun, but the scowl on Karen Whitfield's face was dark enough to summon storm clouds. "Mr. Cooper," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association has decided that this lake needs to be made accessible to all residents." I slowly reeled in my line, taking my time before responding. I'd bought this 20-acre property 5 years ago after retiring from the Army Corps of Engineers, specifically because it included a spring-fed, 5-acre lake. The property line extended well into the water on all sides. It was completely mine, legally and otherwise. "Good afternoon to you too, Mrs. Whitfield," I said. "As I've explained before, this lake isn't part of Lakeside Estates. It's private property." Karen's eye twitched. As HOA president of the upscale development that bordered the north edge of my land, she'd been trying to expand her kingdom of rules and regulations for years. My simple 3-bedroom cabin and the natural landscape I maintained were apparently offensive to her vision of property values and community standards. "That's simply not acceptable, Mr. Cooper. Our development is called Lakeside Estates for a reason. Our homeowners pay premium prices for lake views, and they expect lake access." I shrugged. "Then maybe you shouldn't have named it that before securing access rights." Karen's perfectly highlighted bobs seemed to vibrate with indignation. "We've drafted a proposal," she said, pulling a document from her designer handbag. "The HOA is willing to maintain the shoreline and handle all the liability insurance if you'll allow residents access from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily." I barely glanced at the papers. "Not interested. We're prepared to offer compensation," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "A nominal yearly fee plus membership benefits in our community." "Mrs. Whitfield," I said, standing up. At 6'2", I towered over her. "This lake isn't for sale, rent, or community use. It's my private property, just like your backyard is yours." She sniffed. "My backyard benefits the community by maintaining aesthetic standards. Your wilderness is an eyesore, and this water resource should be properly managed for everyone's benefit." Little did she know that managing water resources was exactly what I'd done for 25 years before retirement, and still did in my role as County Water Commissioner, a part-time position I'd taken on 3 years ago. "The answer is no," I said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I was enjoying my peaceful afternoon." Karen's smile turned predatory. "You know, it would be a shame if the county had to reassess your property for code violations. I have several friends in the zoning department." I almost laughed. Those friends reported to me on water matters, but I kept that to myself. I'd learned long ago that information was power, and Karen Whitfield didn't need to know everything about me. "Are you threatening me?" I asked calmly. "I'm simply pointing out that being a good neighbor benefits everyone," she replied sweetly. "I'll give you a week to reconsider our generous offer." With that, she turned and marched back up the path toward the road where her Mercedes SUV waited. I watched her go, already knowing this wouldn't be the end of it. Karen Whitfield was used to getting her way, and I'd just become her new project. I had no idea how right I was. 3 days later, I arrived home from grocery shopping to find 4 men in matching polo shirts with "Lakeside Maintenance" embroidered on the chest. They were on my property, measuring and taking photos along the shoreline. I parked my truck and approached them, my fishing rods still in the bed. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" A short, balding man who appeared to be in charge stepped forward with a clipboard. "Just doing a preliminary assessment of the shoreline for the Community Access Project." "What Community Access Project?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The HOA recreational expansion," he said, consulting his clipboard. "We're contracted to install a dock, swimming platform, and kayak launch." "On whose authority?" The man looked confused. "The Lakeside Estates HOA, of course." Mrs. Whitfield signed all the paperwork. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the sheriff. You're trespassing." The men exchanged nervous glances as I dialed. While I waited for the call to connect, I asked, Did Mrs. Whitfield tell you that this is private property and not part of Lakeside Estates? She said it was being incorporated into the community through an easement agreement, the foreman said, his confidence clearly faltering. I spoke briefly with the sheriff's dispatcher, who promised to send a deputy. Within 15 minutes, Deputy Harriet Taylor pulled up in her cruiser. She'd been out to my place before for fishing and barbecues, so she knew the property lines well. These gentlemen need to leave, I explained after greeting her. They're trespassing on private property under false pretenses. Deputy Taylor nodded and turned to the maintenance crew. I need to see any documentation authorizing you to be on this property. The foreman handed over his paperwork, which Deputy Taylor reviewed quickly. This is an internal HOA work order, not a legal easement, she said. It gives you no right to access Mr. Cooper's private property. But Mrs. Whitfield said, Mrs. Whitfield doesn't have the authority to grant access to property she doesn't own. Deputy Taylor interrupted. I suggest you pack up and leave immediately. Red-faced, the crew gathered their equipment and departed. As Deputy Taylor was preparing to leave, I asked, Can I get a copy of that incident report? I have a feeling I'm going to need documentation. She nodded. I'll email it to you. And Paul? Watch yourself with that HOA crowd. Karen Whitfield has connections all over the county, and she doesn't like being told no. I thanked her and watched her cruiser disappear down my long driveway. Something told me this was just the opening move in Karen's campaign to claim my lake. I was right about that too. The next morning, I woke to the sound of machinery. Following the noise, I discovered a backhoe operator digging a trench from the Lakeside Estates property line toward my lake. I immediately called Deputy Taylor again. This time, Karen herself arrived before the deputy, emerging from her SUV in what appeared to be country club casual attire, completely inappropriate for the muddy conditions. What do you think you're doing? I demanded. Creating necessary drainage infrastructure, she replied smoothly. The county approved it yesterday. That's impossible, I said. This is private property. Karen pulled out her phone and showed me a permit. County drainage easement. It seems your property has been reassessed as part of the watershed management area. We're simply creating a runoff channel as authorized. I examined the permit, which looked authentic enough, complete with a county seal. But something was off. I would have known about this through my commissioner role. Deputy Taylor arrived and reviewed the documentation. This does appear to be in order, Mr. Cooper, she said reluctantly. It's signed by Director Phillips from Public Works. I pulled her aside. Fiona Phillips wouldn't approve this without consulting me, I said quietly. I'm the county water commissioner, and any watershed management plans cross my desk. The deputy's eyebrows shot up. You never mentioned that before. It's a part-time position. Mostly meetings and paperwork, I explained. But this isn't right. Deputy Taylor nodded. I can't stop them if they have a valid permit, but I'll make some calls. Karen was watching our hushed conversation with narrowed eyes. As Deputy Taylor stepped away to use her radio, Karen approached me with a triumphant smile. The HOA always gets what it wants, Mr. Cooper. You could have taken our generous offer, but now we'll just take what we need through legal channels. The county understands the value of proper development. I crossed my arms. We'll see about that. While Deputy Taylor made her calls, I phoned Fiona Phillips directly. She answered on the third ring. Paul! I was just about to call you. Someone's forged my signature on a drainage easement. I'm looking at it right now, I confirmed. They've already started digging on my property. Fiona's voice hardened. I'm sending a cease and desist immediately and notifying the sheriff. Don't let them continue. I hung up just as Deputy Taylor returned. Something's not right, she said. The permit number doesn't match our database format. It's a forgery, I confirmed. I just spoke with Director Phillips. Karen must have overheard because her expression changed from smugness to alarm. She hurried toward the backhoe operator, gesturing urgently. Stop! Deputy Taylor called out, but the machine's engine was too loud. Karen reached the operator and leaned in, saying something we couldn't hear. Suddenly, the backhoe accelerated its digging, tearing a wider trench toward my lake. Deputy Taylor sprinted toward them, hand on her radio calling for backup. I followed close behind. By the time we reached the backhoe, the operator had realized something was wrong and shut down the engine. "Mrs. Whitfield," Deputy Taylor said firmly, "I need to see that permit again." "I don't have it anymore," Karen replied, her voice slightly higher than normal. "But I assure you it's perfectly legitimate." "Then you won't mind waiting while we verify that," the deputy countered. "Because Director Phillips just confirmed she never signed it." The color drained from Karen's face. "There must be some misunderstanding. I was given this permit by our HOA attorney." Deputy Taylor took out her handcuffs. "Mrs. Whitfield, you're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and presenting fraudulent government documentation. We'll sort out who did what down at the station." As the deputy read Karen her rights, I noticed the backhoe operator looking extremely uncomfortable. "I was just following orders," he muttered. "She said it was all approved." While Karen was secured in the deputy's vehicle, I approached the operator. "How long have you worked for Lakeside Estates?" "I don't," he admitted. "I'm contracted through Whitfield Development. Mrs. Whitfield owns it. She handles all the landscaping and construction for the HOA. Double dips if you asked me, but no one ever does." That was interesting information. Very interesting indeed. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Karen was released on bail, but the county was taking the forged permit seriously. Meanwhile, I did some digging of my own, both literally, to assess the damage to my property, and figuratively, into Lakeside Estates' finances. My position as County Water Commissioner gave me access to all water and sewage billing for the area. I started looking through payment records for Lakeside Estates, and what I found raised serious questions about where residents' HOA fees were really going. While I was compiling this information, I received an unexpected visitor. A young woman in her 30s with stylish glasses and a professional demeanor knocked on my door one evening. "Mr. Cooper? I'm Francine Donovan, a resident at Lakeside Estates and the HOA treasurer. At least I was until yesterday when I was suddenly removed from the board." I invited her in, curious about this development. "What happened?" Francine sighed as she took a seat at my kitchen table. "After Mrs. Whitfield's arrest, I started looking more closely at our financial records. There were discrepancies I'd questioned before, but Karen always had explanations. This time, I dug deeper and found that we've been massively overpaying for maintenance services to companies owned by Karen or her husband. Like the backhoe operator who works for Whitfield Development." "Exactly," Francine nodded. "When I brought my concerns to the board, they called an emergency session and voted me out. 3 of the 5 board members are close friends with Karen." "Do you have copies of these records?" I asked. "Better than that," she smiled, pulling out a flash drive. "I have the entire financial history of the HOA for the past 5 years, including contracts, invoices, and bank statements. Karen's been skimming hundreds of thousands from our community fund." I whistled. "That explains her determination to get access to my lake. Another amenity means higher HOA fees, which means more money she could potentially divert." "It gets worse," Francine continued. "I found emails discussing a plan to have the county condemn part of your property as a public watershed, then have the HOA purchase it at a reduced rate. They were counting on Karen's connections at the county to push it through. Those connections aren't as solid as she believes," I said with a grim smile. Francine leaned forward. "Mr. Cooper, several homeowners are furious about what's happening. We've been paying premium rates for promised amenities that never materialize while watching our fees increase every year. We want to clean house, but we need help exposing everything." I tapped the flash drive. "I think between your evidence and what I've found through county records, we have enough to take to the district attorney. But first, there's something I should tell you about my position in the county." The quarterly meeting of the County Water Commission wasn't typically well attended by the public. Usually, it was just the 5 commissioners, relevant staff, and maybe a contractor or two with business before the commission. So when I walked into the county meeting room to find it packed with Lakeside Estates residents, I couldn't help but smile. Karen Whitfield sat in the front row, flanked by her attorney and two of the remaining HOA board members. She'd been keeping a low profile since her arrest, but she couldn't miss this meeting, not when the agenda included a special review of Lakeside Estates water management practices. I took my seat at the commissioner's table, enjoying the look of shock that spread across Karen's face as I arranged my papers and nameplate. "Paul Cooper, Commissioner, District 3. You," she blurted, rising halfway out of her seat. "You're on the Water Commission?" "I'm not just on it, Mrs. Whitfield," I replied calmly. "I chair the Watershed Management Committee, which is why your fraudulent drainage permit caught my attention so quickly." Her attorney grabbed her arm, pulling her back into her seat and whispering urgently in her ear. The other commissioners watched with interest. I'd briefed them on the situation in our pre-meeting, but they were enjoying the drama nonetheless. Commission Chairwoman Eliza Thornton called the meeting to order. "Before we begin our regular agenda, I understand Commissioner Cooper has a matter requiring immediate attention." I nodded my thanks. "Madam Chair, I've uncovered concerning irregularities in water usage billing and infrastructure development at Lakeside Estates. With the Commission's permission, I'd like to present my findings." Karen's attorney stood. "Madam Chair, my client objects to Commissioner Cooper's involvement in this matter. He has a personal dispute with the Lakeside Estates HOA and should recuse himself due to conflict of interest." Chairwoman Thornton raised an eyebrow. "Commissioner Cooper disclosed his property's proximity to Lakeside Estates when he joined the Commission 3 years ago, and he has recused himself from votes directly impacting his property. However, as these issues affect the entire development and county water resources, his expertise is relevant. The Commission has reviewed the matter and found no conflict that would prevent him from presenting factual findings." The attorney sat down, looking displeased. Karen's face had gone from shock to thunderous. I stood and walked to the presentation screen. "Over the past 3 weeks, following an illegal attempt to create an unauthorized drainage channel onto my property, I began investigating water management at Lakeside Estates. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out what I'd discovered. The HOA had been billing residents for water infrastructure improvements that were never completed. Retention ponds required by county regulations had been filled in to create more buildable lots. Storm drains were improperly installed, causing flooding in downstream properties. And most damning of all, water quality testing that should have been performed quarterly had been falsified for years. The most serious concern, I concluded, is that the community's stormwater is currently draining directly into natural waterways without required filtration, potentially introducing contaminants into the county water system. The room had gone completely silent. Even Karen's attorney had stopped whispering to her and was staring at the evidence projected on the screen. "In light of these findings," I said, "I recommend the Commission issue an immediate compliance order requiring Lakeside Estates to correct these deficiencies within 30 days or face daily fines of $1,000 per violation." Commissioner Hernandez raised his hand. "I'd like to amend that recommendation to include a referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to the falsified water quality reports. Those require certified signatures, and falsification is a felony under county ordinance." "Seconded," said Commissioner Williams. Karen jumped to her feet. "This is a vendetta. He's doing this because I tried to get access to his precious lake." Chairwoman Thornton banged her gavel. "Mrs. Whitfield, you are out of order. Please be seated or you'll be removed from the meeting." Karen's attorney pulled her back down, but she shook him off. "He has no right to investigate Lakeside Estates. He's not even a real commissioner. He's just a retiree playing at having authority." Now the chairwoman looked genuinely angry. "Mrs. Whitfield, Commissioner Cooper holds a master's degree in hydrogeology, served 25 years with the Army Corps of Engineers, and has forgotten more about water management than most people will ever know. His qualifications are not in question." I cleared my throat. If I may, Madam Chair, I believe Mrs. Whitfield's reaction stems from surprise. She's been dealing with various county departments for years through connections and, shall we say, unofficial channels. Finding that her actions have been under official scrutiny has clearly come as a shock. Karen's face went from red to white. I suspected she was mentally reviewing every corner she'd cut, every official she'd misled, wondering how much I knew. The answer was, quite a lot. Especially after Francine Donovan and I had spent evenings comparing HOA records with county permits. The picture they painted wasn't pretty. The Commission will now vote on the recommendations, Chairwoman Thornton announced. All in favor? All 5 commissioners raised their hands. The motion passes unanimously. Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association is hereby ordered to correct all identified deficiencies within 30 days. Additionally, this commission refers the matter of falsified water quality reports to the district attorney for investigation. This meeting will now take a 15-minute recess. As the commissioners filed out, I remained at the table, gathering my papers. Karen Whitfield marched up to me, her attorney trailing behind her with a resigned expression. "You think you're so clever," she hissed. "This isn't over, Cooper." I looked up calmly. "Actually, Mrs. Whitfield, it is. While investigating the water issues, we uncovered evidence of financial improprieties involving HOA funds and contracts with your development company. That evidence has already been provided to the district attorney." Her attorney grabbed her arm. "Karen, don't say another word." But Karen was too far gone. "You had no right to look into our finances. Those records are private." "The financial records came from your former treasurer," I replied. "And when those records showed that HOA funds were used to bribe county officials for falsified permits related to water management, it became relevant to this commission's investigation." Karen's attorney now looked physically ill. "My client will be making no further statements," he said firmly, practically dragging Karen away from the table. As they retreated, Francine Donovan approached with several other Lakeside Estates residents. "That was educational," she said with a small smile. "I had no idea how much was happening behind the scenes. Most people don't pay attention to water management until something goes wrong," I acknowledged. "That's why it was so easy for the HOA to cut corners." An older gentleman stepped forward. "Mr. Cooper, Commissioner, we've called an emergency meeting of homeowners for tomorrow night. We're voting to remove the entire board and elect new leadership. We'd be honored if you could attend as a resource person, to help us understand what needs to be done to bring everything up to code." I considered for a moment. "I'd be happy to attend in my official capacity. And perhaps afterwards, we could discuss being good neighbors in a more general sense." Francine's eyes sparkled. "Like establishing reasonable access to natural resources through proper legal channels and fair compensation?" I chuckled. "Something like that. Though I should warn you, I'm rather attached to my quiet fishing spot. We're more interested in doing things right than in taking what isn't ours," another resident assured me. "Unlike some people." We all glanced toward the door where Karen Whitfield was engaged in a heated argument with her attorney. As if sensing our attention, she looked over, her expression venomous. Deputy Taylor chose that moment to enter the meeting room, accompanied by another officer. "Karen Whitfield?" she called. "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and bribery of public officials." As the deputies led a protesting Karen away, I turned back to my new neighbors. "How about we start fresh?" I suggested. "Maybe a community picnic next month, after all this legal business settles down. I know a nice spot by a lake." 6 months later, I sat in my favorite chair on my dock, fishing rod in hand, enjoying the morning quiet. The water was calm, reflecting the brilliant fall colors from the trees surrounding the lake. "Catch anything yet?" called a voice from the path. Francine Donovan approached, carrying a thermos and what looked like a bag of muffins. "Just enjoying the peace," I replied, setting my rod aside. "Care to join me?" She handed me a muffin as she settled into the second chair I'd added to the dock last month. "The contractors finished the erosion control measures yesterday," The county inspector says we're now fully compliant with all water management regulations. That's excellent news, I said. It's been quite a transformation. Indeed it had. After the old HOA board was removed and Karen Whitfield and 2 county employees were arrested for bribery and fraud, Lakeside Estates had undergone a remarkable revitalization. Francine had been elected HOA president, and her first act had been to hire legitimate contractors to correct all the deficiencies in the development's infrastructure. "We couldn't have done it without your guidance," she said. "The residents wanted me to invite you to our fall festival next weekend. We're celebrating the completion of all the repairs and the launch of our new community kayak program." I smiled at that. After multiple community meetings and good faith negotiations, we'd worked out a limited access agreement for Lakeside Estates residents to use a small portion of my lake for non-motorized watercraft. In exchange, the HOA maintained a buffer of natural landscaping that protected both my privacy and the lake's ecosystem. "I'll be there," I promised. "How's the new stormwater garden working out?" "Beautifully," Francine beamed. "The Master Gardeners Group has adopted it as their special project. You should see the native plants they've put in. It's not just functional, it's becoming a neighborhood highlight." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a blue heron stalk through the shallows at the far end of the lake. "Heard anything about Karen?" I finally asked. Francine nodded. "The district attorney's office called yesterday. She's agreed to a plea deal, 5 years for the embezzlement and fraud, plus full restitution to the HOA. Her husband's development company is being dissolved, and the assets will go toward paying back what they stole. That's good news for your community." "It's good news for everyone," she corrected me. "What she did affected the entire watershed, not just our neighborhood. That's something we all understand now." I raised my coffee mug in a toast. "To good neighbors and clean water." Francine clinked her thermos against it. "And to standing your ground when it matters." As we sat watching the morning mist rise from the lake's surface, I reflected on how a conflict that began with entitlement and greed had transformed into something positive for the whole community. Karen had wanted to take my lake by force or manipulation. Instead, her actions had created an opportunity for genuine connection and shared responsibility. Sometimes water finds its level in unexpected ways. And sometimes so do people.